Hello, Chip GT here, and in the last video we discussed some of the hardware configurations that you would need for a PC to work with a pinball cabinet. In this video, I'm going to discuss the 4K aspect and some of the considerations that you might want to think about when you're purchasing a 4K setup. I'm also going to show you what I selected for my cabinet. So without any further delay, let's coin in and push that start button. Money is always going to be the biggest constraint when you're looking at building a gaming rig. I was working with an $800 budget, and I considered things such as, should I go with a 1080p computer build? Should I go with a 4K computer build? Should I build the PC myself, or should I get a pre-built PC? First, let me say that the PC that I chose to go with does support all the pinball software that is currently out in 4K at 144 frames per second. However, the monitor that's in my cabinet right now is not a 4K monitor. It is a 1080p television that does 144 frames per second. There's a lot of different things to consider when going into a 4K pinball machine, and I'm not going to go way down deep into the weeds. I just want to give you a good overview of some of the things that you need to know when you're considering 4K in your cabinet. So think of this like a 1,000-foot view of what you need to know when you're looking at having a 4K cabinet. A 4K pinball machine truly really starts with what monitor or television you put in your cabinet. 4K resolution when standing close to a cabinet provides a nice, clean, clear, and crisp picture when you're looking and you're standing right next to the monitor. It should not have a screen door effect, and you should not really be able to see the pixels like you would on a 1080p monitor. You need to select your 4K television based off of what will actually fit in your cabinet, and you should also consider frames per second. This is sometimes measured in hertz, and sometimes it'll say, XXX frames per second. If you have a wide body cabinet, you are more than likely looking at something in the neighborhood of a 42-inch 4K monitor or television. Now, as far as televisions go, when you're looking online and you're looking for some of these things, TVs normally range in the area of like 60 hertz refresh rate or 120 hertz refresh rate. Monitors will go up to 144 and 165, but the 165 hertz range is kind of unheard of in a 42-inch monitor, and these 42-inch high refresh rate monitors and televisions cost a lot of money. Now, some people will be like, oh, you can get a 60 hertz 4K television. 4K is 4K. Yeah, that's true, but my television that I have right now runs 144 frames just fine. So there's a contrast of, do you want super clear image, or do you want super fast gameplay? Here are some other ones that I was looking at online. Here's a 43-inch 4K 144 hertz monitor, and it's expensive. That's why I was saying you're gonna feel it in the pocketbook. Is it really worth upgrading to that? So these things will come down in price as newer televisions and newer monitors come out. They will come down in price. That's why I was saying, for me right now, I'm just looking for something that can do 4K, but it's not necessarily, I don't require it to be 4K because the price range is just out of my scope. When it comes to the refresh rate for some of these monitors and televisions, the difference between 120 and 144 and 165, your eyeball may not be able to tell the difference between 144 and 165 or 120 and 144 unless you're really paying attention, but your wallet really will. The next component to consider after the TV is the GPU. It needs to support the number of monitors that you want for your cabinet. Most common builds support 2 to 3 monitors like mine. Some people use a fourth display as a topper that goes on top of the back box, and some people use the fourth display for VR. I wanted 4 just in case I decide to go down the rabbit hole of VR. Modern graphic card performance for 4K gaming and the number of frames per second is based on modern AAA PC titles on a game-to-game basis, and this is a moving target of graphical performance that continues to go further and further back as graphic technologies improve. When you're looking at something like VPX or future Pinball, Pinball FX3, and now the FX 2022 software release, this is no different. VPX has the lowest hardware requirements, and you can get 4K on something like a GTX 1080 at around 120 to 144 frames per second with the right settings. Pinball FX 2022 is the latest software and currently has the most restrictive hardware requirements. Running 4K on this will be totally different from running 4K in VPX. If you're trying to get the same results on FX 2022 with the GTX 1080, there is no way this will work because the software uses new graphical technologies and the GPU can't even run the software. I personally do have an ultra-wide Acer 4K 144 frames per second monitor, and my current PC has a GTX 3060 Ti that is set for 144 frames per second in the NVIDIA control panel settings. Here I've got the NVIDIA control panel up. Here you can see I'm running native 4K and 144 frames per second right here. I set this up in cabinet mode and launched Pinball FX 2022 with the graphics settings set to the highest settings they can go, and I was able to get it to hold and lock in at 144 frames per second solid for the entire game. It fluctuated a little bit when I would go back and forth between the menus, but while running the game, it held solid at 144 frames per second. In fact, that is what you're currently seeing now. It may not look like it's in 4K, and that's because I don't have OBS really set up to push out 4K, so it may not look 4K, but trust me, it is, and it's 144 frames per second. This is why I recommended a GPU such as the 3060 Ti and up family in my last video. Even at the recommended hardware, FX 2022, the 2060 RTX or the AMD RX 5600 XT, you're not going to get the peak performance of 4K at 120 frames per second without lowering the graphical settings to a medium setting. There are a ton of other considerations to look at when you're thinking and considering 4K, and getting the best performance out of your hardware can be found in the VP forums and on Reddit discussion threads for the various settings for Windows and your graphic card configurations, and there's just so much information out there. You really got to look and see what you're looking at and what you're looking at purchasing, but the recommendation from my last video is still good and a viable solution for 4K, but they may require a little bit of tweaking. From there, you want to look at what CPU can support the GPU. Typically, this is like for the 3060, you're looking at an Intel i7 or an AMD Ryzen 5 or higher. Then you want to look at what the motherboard can support and how fast the speeds can go, and make sure you have the right socket for the CPU, and make sure that you have a motherboard that can support a higher RAM speed. I personally recommend that you also, for your hard drive, get an SSD. It's much faster speeds, much faster load times. It's up to you if you want to go with an M.2 or if you want to have just a regular solid state drive. I recommend the M.2s because they are much faster and they're pretty cheap right now. There is a discussion to be had when looking at buying a PC versus building one yourself. The benefit in building it yourself is that you get exactly what you want, and in some cases it can be cheaper. What I discovered with the August sales though is that's not necessarily the case. And some of the things that I was willing to let go of saved me about $400 in my purchase. I ended up going into Micro Center. I spent about an hour with the sales rep looking at various considerations for a 4K PC, and this system, the setup that I was looking at building right here, it's just way overkill for a pinball machine. What I selected for this was an AMD Radeon RX 67 XT Hellhound with 12 gigabytes of GDDR6, an Asus Tough Gaming Wi-Fi AM4 ATX motherboard, a Ryzen 7 processor, 32 gigabytes of Vulkan RAM, 650 watt power supply, a Western Digital Blue 1 terabyte M.2 SSD, deep cool liquid CPU cooler, because the Ryzen 7 is a very hot CPU, and I planned no case, but I wanted to use a LIAN LI vertical GPU mount to hold the GPU in place so that it wouldn't rock around or break the motherboard or break the PCIe Express port or break the GPU from the cabinet being moved around. This will hold the GPU rock solid like it was in a case without the main computer being in a case. And then I also considered getting some fans to help push and pull air out. After tax, this whole setup for all these components was $1,282.90. I asked the sales rep to print out this sheet, and I told him that I wanted to look around at a few other things before committing to this build and sealing the deal. I walked over to the pre-built aisle and specifically looked at the power spec setups from my last video. The price for these things had dropped again by almost $100. And another sales rep came up to me and said, you know, we have another model, it's the 715, and it is also on sale this week, right here. It looks almost identical, but it's not. It has water cooling, it has a beefier GPU, it's got a beefier CPU, but it's got the same motherboard and some of the other things. But this also had dropped in price by $400. Just for a little bit money more, I would get a much more powerful GPU. Our Noodles was there with me, and he said, Dad, do you think this is a little overkill for a pinball cabinet? And I had to stop and think for a minute because I was getting really excited about the sales price, and I realized, yeah, he's 100% correct. I loaded up User Benchmark on my phone and compared my current 3060 Ti that I use for my main PC for everything to the RX 6650 XT. The 3060 is just a little bit better in some areas, and both can do 4K between 120 and 144 frames per second in the Pinball software. Then I loaded the 6950, and this way outperforms the 3060 Ti that I currently have, and is 100% specifically built for modern AAA 4K titles at max frames per second. So with that said, my recommendation still stands as of August 2023. The PowerSpec 516 will run everything that I need it to do, with a few takeaways that, you know, I have the audio puck, I have some of the other things. I don't really care about the Wi-Fi, I don't care about the Bluetooth. I mean, those are all niceties. This can do 4K and will run my 1080p monitor at 144 frames flawlessly. So if you want to future-proof yourself and you have a little extra money, you can consider building it yourself and getting your own rig. But I also recommend these sales right now are amazing. They cannot be beat. I ended up getting the returned PowerSpec 516 for $629. So with that extra money, like the little bit of a difference there, I decided to go ahead and get the 1 terabyte M.2 SSD for the second M.2 slot on the motherboard, and I decided to get 2 more 8 gigabyte sticks of RAM that cost me $32, and I ended up walking out the door with this PC for $703.98. This is a true budget build because my budget was actually $800, and for the first time ever in doing a pinball cabinet video, I was under budget. This actually leaves me a little bit of wiggle room for additional things that I may need to decase this PC to get it into my cabinet. If you're watching this video a year from now, PCs then will have better performance and may be about the same price. Make sure you consider what the software requirements are for the current software, what TV you have, its frame rates are. Do the research on the video graphics cards, look at what other people are getting performance-wise on Reddit and on the VP forums, and get what works best for you. Here is the returned PowerSpec 516 that I got for $629. Currently, I have installed all the pinball software on a fresh version of Windows 11, and I am slowly installing all my tables to trim out what tables have been updated and upgraded over time to save space and create some custom artwork for this machine. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to get custom artwork to look amazing, and hopefully I will get my PC into this cabinet before the end of August. I want to get it to a point where everything is working before I mount it, so for now it'll just sit under the cabinet while I make all the tweaks. If you have learned something from this, please give me a like, please subscribe, it really does help the channel grow. Thank you all for watching, I'll see you in the next one.